Mellissa Bradley is the Program Manager with Water Sensitive SA and as an experienced water sensitive urban designer here in Adelaide. She's a strong advocate for the creation of more livable cities and towns through the delivery of urban growth and infill development that delivers best practice water sensitive urban design. Mellissa?
Hey, we're rolling. I'm sure if I asked you to put up your hand who knew about us, probably might be a few more who doesn't know about us, might be a few more that don't know, but just for those in the audience who are new to us, Water Sensitive SA is a capacity building program. Our main role is to work with practitioners, so mostly, traditionally been your engineers, your architects, your landscape architects and your planners, and trying to help them through the planning, design, approval, construction and maintenance phases of putting these water sensitive urban design features on the ground. So that's our primary goal. And I think I mentioned architects, but it's been pretty low to date, but I think we need to be expanding it, and I'll go through why throughout tonight. Oh, gone the other way. I'd also like to acknowledge our partners. The Adelaide Mountain Lofty Ranges NRM Board are also a major contributor to Water Sensitive SA, but we also do have a lot of local government partners and SA Water and the EPA who basically have a keen interest in seeing our urban landscape transformed through water sensitive urban design. So we thank them. Just a quick snapshot of what we do. We have doing recently quite a lot of advocacy with government because we're not government, we're semi-government, we're not an industry association, we're somewhere in between. So we've been really advocating for greater uptake of the water sensitive urban design policy. There actually is a state government water sensitive urban design policy, and it includes targets around stormwater runoff quality and quantity and water conservation. And at the moment, it doesn't actually fit anywhere with any legislative power, and so we've been advocating for that to be brought into the planning policy library. So hopefully in the new years to come and under the new planning bill, we might see some of these targets so that we can actually get some measurable outcomes, because at the moment there's no benchmark to measure performance on water sensitive urban design through the planning system. We also do training. We've done wetland detail design, streetscape, biofiltration detail design, that type of thing. We have lots of opportunities to network through seminars, but also trying to bring researchers. So the latest research, there's all this fantastic work being done by the Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities, the Goiter Institute in Adelaide, and it's not reaching the people who need it. So we're a bit of a conduit to get that out. We're also looking at developing some tools and guides to help practitioners. We've also got a website, and probably one of the things that might be of interest to you is we've got an interactive map. You can go in there and you can search under, who's doing wetlands, and we've got photos and imagery of different treatment systems, street scale, biofiltration systems, infiltration systems. So it's a bit of an image gallery library of who's doing what in Adelaide. It can always do with some more projects. So if you notice your pet project's not there, let us know and we'll get it up there for you. Some of the things that really drive what we do, and I'm going to be putting quite a bit of emphasis on this tonight, is getting the reintegration of water back into the urban landscape, particularly to create microclimate for the urban cooling. I'll talk a bit more about the changes in the landscape from the creating impervious areas, but really it's really transforming our city, and we really need to take the front foot and see how we can do things better because increasing imperviousness is really a surrogate for loss of green space. So how are we going to get that balance back into the environment? Also reusing water at source, or as close as possible to the source. Protecting the receiving water quality, and it's not just, am I turning that off? Hello. Protecting the receiving water quality, not only the streams but also the marine environment. The stormwater discharges are having quite a significant impact on the seagrasses, affecting coastal sand drift because we've lost our seagrasses. So really what we're doing on our land is greatly affecting what's happening in the marine environment. And we're also looking at fit for purpose water use. So often people will think water sensitive urban design is wetlands. but it's also more than that. It's about looking at our recycled water supplies and how we can use that to green our cities and create prosperity. Okay. So I'm just going to give you Urban Hydrology 101 because it's really critical that the drivers that we need to acknowledge for change are right here in front of us. If you had a 1 hectare forest and you had 10 million litres of rain fall on that forest, you'd get about 85% of that would evapotranspire and about 15% of that would slowly make its way through the soils to the stream and create that base flow that keeps our ephemeral streams rolling. But if that same amount of water fell on an impervious site, and to be honest, this site's 100%. We're getting most developments now are looking at about 85% impervious, and that's just your normal domestic, let alone how a commercial site goes. So we're really creating quite an imbalance in the water balance. So we'd end up getting no water go through to the soil. So we're not actually getting any soil moisture, which is what we need to sustain our green spaces. So nothing's getting through to the soils, it's not infiltrating to the groundwater system, and we're getting this 85% of that straight off to the water course through via pipes, and it's eroding our streams, causing damages. Now this looks very engineering, I'm sorry, I am an engineer, but really what the take-home message here is the little red line, the peak, that's the natural stream. That's the small peak. Over time, the rain will start, you'll get a peak, it'll drop away. Once we develop a site, the time to peak is much quicker, so we're getting more flashier floods. The actual peak is much higher. And if you look at the areas under this is another bit engineering for you, but the area underneath those curves represents the volume that comes off the site. So we're getting way more volume coming off the site. So it's quicker, it's peakier, and there's more coming off. And we have to manage that somehow. So at a catchment scale, this is probably one of the latest, probably the flagships projects in Adelaide, the City of Marion, the Oaklands Park wetlands. This project was created to treat stormwater before it's discharged into the water system, the stormwater system, but also to treat it and then re-inject it back into the aquifer for reuse around councils' parks. It also collects harvest water from the Sturt drain, and so it actually takes more than its own catchment. It actually takes water from upstream catchments, treats that water, and then for reuse in the public space. And so projects like this are going on in many, many places around Adelaide. So if you look at St Clair, one of the newer developments as well, this is a wetland as well. It's a bit more structured. To save space, they haven't gone with a sort of traditional environmental batters. It's quite formed. But this project treats the local catchment, but it also treats water that comes from the torrens, harvests it and treats it for aquifer recharge and for then irrigation back on that public open space. So at a large scale, we get some really good economies of scale by treating the stormwater in these large systems. If you just sort of take it down a step, down to the precinct scale, this is just around the corner from where we are now. So if anyone's familiar with the Bowden area, this is Kevin Taylor Park, and I really, really love what they've done here. You wouldn't actually know that this is actually a stormwater treatment system here and a stormwater management system. That's actually a detention basin. So when there's high flows, that will fill and then it will slowly empty probably over a couple of days. But what they've done is this is quite an intensive development. It's medium density, but what they've done is integrate the water management into the landscape so seamlessly that you don't know it's there. And I think this is what we need to be a lot clearer about. I did want to put up a photo of what we used to do with the detention basins, but I didn't want to offend the people who gave me the photo. But we traditionally have just put in a corner block a pocket park. We've made steep side detention basins. It fills up 12 times a year. The rest of the time no one can use the park because the sides of the park are like this. And so really moving towards a better way of linking engineers with landscape architects to come up with better outcomes and multiple use of public open space is where we need to go if we're going to be able to adequately deal with the amount of runoff that's coming off of our urban catchments. So just thinking, some of you may be familiar with the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. It's just been reviewed. The original plan said we're looking for 70% of new housing stock from urban infill and 30% from greenfield sites. We know that we're already at 67%, and it's likely that when the next version of the 30-year plan is released, probably can't be far away if it hasn't come out already, that target will be 80% infill. So that presents a massive challenge for us because that's having more and more intensive development in our inner metro area, and certainly infill development is the way to go to protect the fringes biodiversity and the farmland from urban growth, but we need to be a lot cleverer about how we're doing our urban infill. And if you have a look, the figures, we've gone from a median block size in 2002-3 of 520 metres squared to now we're down to about 375 metres squared is the average, the median block size. So we have to, that's running out. There's not a lot of space on that block to deal with some of these issues, but some people are being quite clever about that, and I'll take you through a few of those. So really, what this means is we've got limited amount of green space and we need to be integrating with that, but we're looking more and more the streetscape and the allotment scale are going to have to perform, and how can we get these spaces to perform some of these ecological functions that say the wetlands have been traditionally doing. So we'll be looking at harvesting at the allotment scale, biofiltration systems in the streetscape, and I'll talk a bit more about those, or tree pits that take water straight from the curb and gutter, take it to the tree, and so that the tree can uptake that water. So this one here on the left, that's Lochiel Park, for those of you who know it, in the city of Campbelltown area. A lot of their streetscapes have no curb or no gutter, so the water just sheet flows off into the garden beds and then infiltrates through. And so really you're not getting that concentration of flow to get erosion in, but it's also distributing the flow nicely for the plants to uptake. And then the one on the right, Murchison Street, we had a training course out there recently. That's a streetscape biofilter that will treat the stormwater. It'll go through a filter media, and I think I've got a cross section here of a typical one for you. So for those of you who don't know what a biofilter is, or a rain garden, the top part is a special filter media. It's actually quite sandy. It was interesting what Peter was saying about having 1% more organic matter increase. I think it's doubled. Did you say doubled your water holding capacity? Well, these systems are very sandy to get maximum infiltration through, because it's the infiltration through. We need to get that quite quick rate through to treat the stormwater as it goes through, because they're quite small systems, commonly only about 0.5 to 1% of the catchment that is running to it, so they're quite small compared to their contributing catchment. And so it'll filter through. There's a sand layer that's a transition between the sand and the gravel layer, and then that bottom gravel layer is actually, you can see where the offtake is. That bottom layer is actually a permanent storage. So the bottom of the rain garden is actually impermeable, so it doesn't actually filter through to the landscape. And we need that in Adelaide because we have such long dry spells between rainfall events that storage layer is very important to sustain the semi-aquatic plants that are feeding that rain garden. So I just want to go back now down to the allotment scale, because I figured there might be a lot of architects here. I'm just curious, how many are actually architects in the room? So a bit of a mix, okay. So I try to think, right, rather than talk about real engineering type stuff, I'll try to talk about how at the allotment scale we can actually try and achieve some of these things, because at the moment there isn't a mechanism if you're not part of a large-scale development where you contribute to possibly a wetland, possibly a street-scale system. How can these types of developments contribute to getting that balance? At the moment, we are getting developments like this one that are pretty much, I would say that's 95% impervious. There's been a bit of private green space you can see, or private space, but often they're paved. So you'll end up with maybe a tiny bit of a garden bed, not too much lawn, and that is typical. I'm sure City of Marin won't mind me saying that that's in their area, and they are currently at about 65% of impervious of their total community. Under the 30-year plan and under predicted development plan changes, they're probably looking at about 89% impervious across their council area. So you can imagine how that's going to transform the heat, the amenity, and the livability of that community. And this one on the right is, I don't know, this block, it's like a 90%, I think it's about 100% impervious. I can't actually see anything green on that block. So we are allowing development to occur that is just denuding the site of anything remotely representative of the environment. And there's nowhere for the stormwater to infiltrate. But what we want is this. We want greenery in our streetscapes. We want permeable paving in our developments, and we want to go up instead of out so that we're not actually taking up so much of the green space with the built form. This Union Street, Dulwich, I love this street. These people are like the guerrilla gardeners. They'd started just taking over the street and planting whatever they could in any bit of the verge. Then council came along and were going to redo the curb. And so what they did was they introduced what they're calling bee pods, and in the verge is a crate. That's all it is. It's wrapped in geofabric, and the rainwater, the roof pipes from the rainwater from each house connects to one of these bee pods, and then they infiltrate water after a storm, and it goes in and it provides water to the trees in the local street. Very simple, pretty cost effective, about $500 each household, but it's sustaining a beautiful streetscape, and it's amazing. You can't actually find a spot almost in that verge that's not planted out by the community. They've even got like lettuces and goodness knows what else growing out in the streetscape. So go and have a look if you're ever in Dulwich. It's a great example of where water sensitive urban design can also facilitate sort of community greening. And well, that's probably all I want to say about that slide. So really, allotment scale solutions, I won't go through all of them in detail, but just to say that on-site detention is our traditional answer, and quite frankly, I don't support it. All it does is prevents flooding downstream, but it provides no benefit to the landholder who's paying for it. So they put all this money in, put in a detention system, and then people downstream benefit. They don't get any benefit. Much rather see a retention scheme, which is when you hold the water on site and reuse it. Detention scheme just holds it till the storm's over and then releases it slowly. Or not necessarily till the storm's over, just start slowly releasing it. Retention, on-site retention, reuse on site, rain gardens, vegetated swales, and really reducing impervious areas is one of the things that I think we could be looking far better at. And that's where I feel that we've traditionally worked, like I said before, with engineers, landscape architects and planners. And I really think it's about time that we started working more with the architecture industry and with builders, because they're the ones that are going to have the greatest influence on what the urban landscape is going to look like in the future. So this is the 100 square metre footprint house. It's owned and built by a chap called Matthew Levesque. I hope I've said his name right. He's in Brisbane. This featured in the Green magazine, if any of you read it. His block is about 400 square metres, and he's managed to contain himself and only build 100 square metres of it. The rest of it is still green. The rest of it can still provide microclimate. The big dot on the top there, that's an existing mature tree. So obviously he's tried also to save that tree, whether he wanted to or the local planning laws made him save the tree, I'm not sure. But what it's done is it's created the basis for a great microclimate there. He's got a rainwater tank, a 5,000 litre rainwater tank just there. And he's only got 25% site coverage, which is a massive contrast to what we're seeing in Adelaide. In Adelaide right now, that site probably would have been typically developed up to here. And so his rainwater tank is used to flush toilets, to do the laundry and to the garden. 5,000 litre tank in Adelaide, I probably wouldn't recommend that you did all that with it, because we have such dry spells throughout the summer. You wouldn't have enough water to do all of those things. But in Brisbane, they have lots of summer rain, so their tank would be topping up. I haven't gone through it here, but we've just released on our website a rainwater tank size selection table, so people can go through looking at roof area versus what your applied use is, and how much roof area you've got connected, your size of your tank, so you can have a look and try and size the right tank for your household. But if you also have a look here, so you can see that mature tree, you can see the green space that he's left, and it's really quite a modest development. And I really just want to put the challenge out there. I'm wondering why we're not seeing the value in creating a more modest footprint of development and leaving some of the space that we own for green space, for things that you can, water sensitive urban design features, and basically to create microclimate. If you have a look at the case study, he's also got lots of other features about cross ventilation and good insulation. So for those of you who are more in the built form, you might be interested to see that. Other ways about minimising impervious surfaces. If you're involved in a larger scale development, having all of the garage backing onto a back laneway reduces the need for a driveway. So that's just even less impervious, unnecessary impervious space that you can have. So that's one way that you can do it in a larger scale development. But even in your own backyard, just looking at, I'm not sure why you have to concrete everything. The wheels only go over a certain strip. Why are we making the whole area impervious for a driveway? And the bottom one there, I mean, that's a really, really interesting feature, the way they've dressed that up. And I actually think it's a great alternative. These people, the one with a little shed, that's actually, you can't see it here, but that's a bike shed. And the people have made a green roof out of a bike shed. So if we can do it in a bike shed, we can do it anywhere. And then obviously in England, we've got a lot more green roofs. That's obviously being driven more by an insulation driver than a water sensitive urban design, but they are actually starting to understand the flood mitigation benefits of green roofs as well. And just Christie Walk, just briefly, this is a medium scale development just on Sturt Street in the city, and they've achieved 30% green space, and they've got green roofs, a lot of permeable paving, and a community garden down the bottom here. That's actually a community garden, and here's the 2 green roofs. And then all through here, there's not one area that I saw that was not permeable paving. So all of these things are helping to keep that balance in the urban water cycle. And again, we've got this, I know there's probably a lot of designers here, we've got this fascination at the moment with exposed aggregate concrete. And it is beautiful, but I'd like to suggest that maybe that permeable paving there is equally beautiful, and that perhaps if we think about again, rather than hard paving everything, maybe we can look at some more solutions that are impervious, that can infiltrate, keep water in the soil, and actually sustain some of the trees that are trying to grow in our streetscapes. Because at the moment, in many areas, we've got trees trying to grow in this much soil, and they're not being very effective. And just to be mindful, its graph is rainfall intensity millimetres per hour. Most of our events are in that 1 to 2 millimetres per hour, easily can be taken up by permeable paving or some sort of impervious surface. So by having impervious surfaces that aren't going to shed water quickly, we can actually manage a lot of those small events just on local sites. And just briefly, this is just a standard off the paper development that's out there at the moment. Just having it as a designer, just thinking about how you can create nooks and crannies, nooks in your footprint, because basically you have to have a metre off the side of the building, off the side of the boundary, in most cases, for a detached dwelling. But once this is fully built out, there's no room for anything like a rainwater tank. And so people were saying, well, I can't fit one in because there's nowhere for it. With a little bit of thought for design, and these little nooks, there's all sort of rainwater tanks of all different shapes and sizes. They could easily be slipping into these spaces. So really, we could be having, in this little nook, we could have 2 of these slimline rainwater tanks. We could have, believe it or not, that's a rainwater tank. I can't believe, I was looking for these small tanks and I found this. Having your outdoor seating area is a rainwater tank for storage. People are producing these things. So they understand that we've got small courtyards, not a lot of space. We need to be using them better. The wall of your garage, it's actually a rainwater tank, a slimline rainwater tank. So they don't have to take up a huge amount of space if we're just a bit smarter about how we try to integrate this. This is the same development. At the back is a landscape garden. That could quite easily be a rain garden. It's not, because of the way the property is oriented, all the outdoor living space is here. This is probably going to be underutilised space, so it could quite easily, you could have the downpipe, there's actually downpipes here and here, they could run straight off into that rain garden. So just thinking about how we orient the building that can facilitate water sensitive urban design and harvesting is quite simple really. And that's just another shot of that garden. And then another form, this is more of your detention system, but you could also have the storage under the front driveway. There's no reason why we can't do that as well. So yeah, so I'm really just putting the challenge out to you to say, can we be doing our built form differently to facilitate the allotment scale solutions, because that is where the vast majority of the opportunities are going to lie looking forward. So we need to start seeing some innovation in that space if we're going to try and create the type of cities that we all want to live in. And just to finish up, there's a bit of a plug for some of our advertisement for some of our events coming up. Thanks.